Oh my gosh. God, I'm sorry. This is a bad start. Okay. Thank you, Latina. I'm honored to be here today.
Glad to have you. For those who may not be familiar, will you tell our audience a little bit about what you do?
Absolutely. I am a Chief Human Resources Officer in the financial services industry, and I lead several teams, not just human resources, also learning and development. And I lead the fraud and physical security teams, as well as the customer experience operations team for the company.
Awesome, which is a lot. You have a lot of responsibility, and I'm excited to jump in. So let's get started. You began your career protecting communities, and now you shape culture for thousands in the banking and financial industry. What has carried through both worlds that still defines the way you lead today?
That's a great question. And when I look back, there's a common thread that I recognize that runs through really every chapter of my career.
Mm,
And the one thing that I've really noticed is that I've always been drawn to being a voice for people. And in law enforcement, that meant literally protecting communities and helping people find calm
mhm.
in moments of complete chaos. When I first stepped into law enforcement, I was 21 years old. And I can remember walking into scenes where people, they were scared, they were overwhelmed with emotions, and they were just not sure of what to do next. And as a police officer, you have mere seconds to quickly assess the situation at hand and try to figure out, where do we go from here? So you're constantly absorbing everybody else's storm. And that's just part of your role as an officer. Because when you show up, people want you to bring a sense of calm and steadiness to the situation. And so you learn very quickly that what people say and what people need are not always the same thing. And it takes a lot of awareness and patience to read between those lines and then to lead people through a situation, no matter how challenging it gets.
Mhm.
And so when it comes to how I lead today, I'd say that my work in human resources may look very different from law enforcement in many ways, but I still see leadership as an act of service. And it's not about authority or control, but more about responsibility to creating environments inside of organizations where people feel safe. They feel safe to speak up, they feel supported to grow. I also think it's my responsibility and any leader's responsibility to find solutions that lead to the best outcome for the people and the company. And that's a really delicate balance. Something else that comes to mind is that based on my experience, I believe that the best leaders are great translators.
Mhm.
And they're going to know how to bridge a gap between the way that people are feeling and what the organization needs. So they're taking the time to listen to the employees' concerns, to listen to their needs, and then act in a way that will turn those complex situations into clarity for them. And when leaders can do that, people start trusting them more and people become confident that they're being led in the right direction.
I absolutely love it. This is why I'm excited to talk to you today. Um, Through some of our conversations, you shared about the different like workshops and things that you're doing for your employees. And so you've made it clear that well-being and mental health aren't side effects, like they're core business strategies. How does leading with care change the bottom line in ways most people don't see?
I do think of well being and mental health as something that organizations have to embed into their culture.
Mhm.
And I've seen firsthand what happens when those things are ignored. Performance doesn't normally drop overnight. It can erode over time. And sometimes it happens quietly. People might start to doubt themselves or to doubt their own abilities. They may start communicating less or communicating differently. And sometimes leaders never really connect the dots back to the environment that they created. Now, I'm not saying that all performance issues are caused by leadership deficiencies, but I do think that leaders have to have enough self awareness to consider what factors may have contributed to the decline in performance overall. And sometimes it may even be something that is occurring in the employee's personal life. And for years, we've been told, don't bring your personal life to work.
Yeah.
But when we say that to people, what we're really telling them is, I want you to leave part of yourself at the door because it's not safe to bring that part of you to work. And the problem with that is that humans don't work that way. You can't separate the person who's dealing with real life from the employee who's expected to perform. Humans don't just shut off their emotions because they badge into a building or log on to a Zoom call.
Mhm.
And, I've heard leaders say, well, I'm not a counselor. That's not my job. And I agree, leaders aren't expected to fix a situation, and they don't necessarily have to dive into details with an employee. But sometimes just a simple acknowledgement can lower that emotional intensity for the employee. And if you recognize that someone's acting different, offer them a little room to breathe. Maybe they need to take a quick walk or have a private conversation. Maybe they just need someone to listen for a few minutes.
Mhm.
Maybe they need someone to guide them toward mental health resources. Support doesn't always mean absorbing someone's emotional load. You can support somebody at work and still hold expectations for their work. Both can exist. And when they both exist, it can change the bottom line in ways that many people don't recognize because care builds trust, and then trust turns into a sense of ownership. So when people feel supported, they usually can think more clearly and confidently because they're not using all of their mental energy trying to manage the stress of uncertainty. And instead, they're using their energy to be more innovative and solve problems, help customers. So when leaders lead with care, I believe and I've seen that teams perform better because they feel safe. People communicate better overall, and they want to be part of an organization that allows them to thrive in that kind of environment.
Yes.
And I think that that kind of leadership is one of the biggest drivers of performance.
Couldn't agree with you more. It's so important, I think, as well, to just know that the time and the effort that you put in every day, at your job, people actually appreciate it, right? Because it is difficult to separate sometimes when you're dealing with something personal and you come to work. And so I appreciate everything that you just said. I agree. It allows employees to feel safe. And just knowing that someone showing a little bit of compassion and empathy, it makes such a difference. It actually makes you want to do more, right?
Great.
So yes, I agree 100%. That's awesome. So you spent much of your career in high stake environments, from law enforcement to the financial services industry, where calm and confidence aren't actually optional. What have those moments taught you about leading with clarity when the pressure is at its peak?
This is a great question, too, because I have spent much of my career in environments where calm and confidence were never optional.
Mhm.
They've always been a requirement.
Yeah.
And in law enforcement, I learned that pressure does not build character. if anything, it helps reveal character, because every decision, every word you say, even the tone you're using when you're speaking sends a message. And people actually read you long before they listen to you. I can remember moments when stakes were very high, and I recognized that panic did not make the situation any safer. But what did was people who had composure, people who helped to provide clarity, those things would help build trust in everyone around you. And it's the same in leadership today. When an organization's under stress, whether it's uncertainty, whether the organization is going through change, maybe it's just a constant pace of change. People don't need more noise. They need more certainty, more clarity, and they need steadiness. I think that's what it comes down to. They need someone who can help them translate that chaos into clarity and then slow things down just enough so that everyone can make sense of what's happening in the moment. And that includes for themselves, not just for everyone around them. They don't have to be the first one to speak. They can listen, they can observe, they can help bring focus to everything that truly matters. And so I really do. I think that translating people's needs and understanding how to bring steadiness to a situation will help turn that fear into direction. And I've also learned through a lot of high pressure moments that they will expose the strength of your culture. So if your culture is built on trust and accountability, it can recover stronger if it takes a hit. If it's built on ego or on fear, it will fracture your culture. And, earlier I mentioned how police officers absorb everyone's storm. Over time, I've realized that leadership is not about controlling that storm at all. It's more about being the steady voice in the middle of it. So when people trust that steadiness, they trust themselves more and more. And that's what ends up transforming pressure into progress.
Pressure into progress. So you talk about steady voice, and a part of that, having that steady voice and being that steady voice is one of the things that you clearly identify with and exhibit and have been for years, and that is being an excellent listener, and just identifying what the people around you, the people that you actually steward, what their needs are. And you have to be, right, an active, effective listener to be able to identify those things and then offer, something that is a steady voice, because I'm sure it's different, right, for each person. Each individual has a different need and at a different time.
Absolutely.
And so, just hearing you talk about listening and being that calm in the storm, that's huge. I'm sure it's been a lesson learned over the years, but it seems like you've done very well with perfecting it, and just being able to offer those great qualities to your employees, which is wonderful. You have led in spaces where women's voices haven't always been heard. What has it taken for you to stand firm, to just be seen and lead with confidence in rooms that weren't always built for you, weren't built for us as women?
I will share a couple of examples.
Okay.
And the reason these examples stand out is because they help shape my idea of leadership and my style. When I worked in law enforcement early on, like I said, I started when I was 21. A very seasoned officer asked me a question one day, and he didn't know if I was capable of handling situations if things got dangerous. And I'll never forget, I was at work one day and I had just come off of a call of an accident scene. And we got back to the station. I was writing a report, and that officer had just come on duty. And he looked at me and he said, every time I see you, I have to wonder whether or not you could handle yourself in a dangerous situation.
Hmm.
And I looked at him and I said, officer, every time I look at you, I wonder the same thing. And I didn't say it. I probably did say it with an attitude at the time, but I wasn't coming from a place of attitude. It was honesty, because my life is just as important as his.
Absolutely. Yes.
And courage is not defined by gender.
That's right.
And I honestly had no idea whether or not he or anyone else on the police department would be able to handle a dangerous situation either. People say they can, and they can train for it day in and day out, but you never actually know how someone's going to respond under pressure until it happens.
Yeah.
And later, after watching officers in action for years, I saw that pressure does not discriminate. Some men handle pressure well and some don't at all. And the same is true for women. But what separated people wasn't gender. It was their mindset, their awareness, and their composure. Like I said, their ability to bring steadiness to that storm. And years later, this is another example. This was during my corporate career. I found myself at one point as the only woman on a leadership team.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of the men said that they found me intimidating. And I was told, I'll never forget this day, I was told to sit on my hands unless I was asked to speak.
Oh, wow.
And that moment, to me anyway, revealed so much more about the culture of that organization than about me. Because I don't think necessarily that I was intimidating as much as maybe making someone uncomfortable, because I was bringing a perspective that challenged their comfort zone. And they weren't looking for that. They weren't looking for dialogue or different perspectives. They were looking for agreement. And so those moments really taught me something that I carry with me today, that confidence does not mean competence.
Mm-hmm.
It's more about knowing when to add value. The loudest person in the room is not always the most capable. Sometimes they're just the most uncomfortable with silence. And sometimes they feel like speaking up first makes them sound like they're in control of the situation, even if what they're saying doesn't really add value. And it's interesting because when you watch people in a room, they tend to build respect for those that speak up quickly and loudly. But sometimes what they're saying really isn't, like I said, adding value at all. So from my perspective, when leaders take time to reflect, to process the information before responding, it's wise. Getting different perspectives, even if they're different from yours, is so critical to understanding that we all look through different lenses, and it takes a very diverse perspective or consideration of all of the diverse perspectives to really consider the best path forward. So knowing when to speak, when to listen, when to challenge is key to moving a conversation forward. Yeah. And I've also learned that a great leader can't just be a champion for their own team. And this is something that has really, really stood out to me over the years, is that I see leaders over different divisions of an organization, and they are champions for their teams. but they're often not champions for everybody else's team.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always perplexed by that, because every role of an organization strengthens the organization in some way.
Yeah.
If not, we wouldn't have those roles. An organization wouldn't pay people, right, to do those things for the organization. So for me, a great leader is going to be one who champions every team across the organization just as strongly as they champion their own. Because at the end of the day, success is about how well everyone moves forward together.
That's right. Absolutely. Let me start by saying thank you for your courage. The person that said to you to sit on your hands, clearly that's their insecurities, right? That's being projected on you. And so thank you for not allowing that person or those individuals to dim your light. Thank you for that. Thank you for trusting the voice that's within you and continuing to allow your confidence to shine. It's clear why you're over several departments in many ways, especially when you think about teamwork, as you just talked about, and championing more than just, your specific department. I want to shift for a moment because even in a people first culture, protecting that culture takes strategy and trust. Cybersecurity is often seen as a technical issue, but the truth is it begins and ends with people, right? And so the level of trust between an organization and its employees determines how strong its defenses really are. Cybersecurity isn't just data and systems, it's the relationship of trust between employees and institution. So, how are you translating that into every HR decision that you make?
Great question. Cybersecurity at its core, it is about trust. And trust is fundamentally human. So yes, it's also about systems and controls and compliance, but none of that matters if the people behind the computer screens don't feel connected to the company's mission or the company's purpose in some way. And I think that the most sophisticated systems in the world won't be able to protect an organization if the people inside don't feel a sense of ownership and accountability. So from an HR perspective, the work is more about building a culture of shared responsibility.
Mm.
It's about helping employees understand that they are truly our first line of defense.
Yes.
And it's not because someone told them to be, but because they care enough about the organization and the people that it serves. Many companies have trainings and policies in place, like I think it's called a no-click campaign, where employees may receive emails, and if they click on that email, it may alert the IT team that this employee just clicked on an email that had red flags they should have seen before clicking on it. And when that happens, a company's policy usually dictates what happens next when an employee does that.
Mm-hmm.
And from my experience, this is where we have to be careful, because with cybersecurity, silence can be the biggest threat, not just that click itself.
Yes.
And employees have to trust the organization enough to raise their hand in that moment and say, I just clicked on something I don't think I should have. And they need to be able to do that without the fear of losing their job for reporting it. I don't think people generally fail those tests just because they're careless. I think that they fail because they're human, and humans are going to make mistakes. But if an employee is embarrassed or afraid of being punished or being judged, they may choose not to report it at all. And that is when I think the risk becomes even bigger for the organization. So again, from like an HR perspective, I think the goal is wanting employees to come forward when they click on something, but they have to trust you enough to do that.
Yeah.
And if they can report it early, then it gives IT time to contain that situation as much as possible and hopefully prevent a small incident from becoming a bigger issue. So the real message is not about expecting employees to be perfect,
Right.
but expecting them to partner with the company. And instead of only measuring whether or not they ever make a mistake, maybe that real measure should be how quickly the employee communicates the mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Because that shows how much they trust the organization. That shows how responsible they are, whether or not they're taking accountability,
Yeah.
and then how willing they are to protect the organization. So again, it all comes down to trust. And a culture of trust will turn employees into a company's strongest defense rather than the greatest risk.
Yes, trust is so important. So, when you think about the future of work and the emerging of um, humanity, technology, and trust, what kind of leader will the world need most? And what will it take to become that person or that type of leader?
I've thought about this question a lot, just really over the years. And just as the world evolves,
Mm-hmm.
people evolve too. And you have to adapt to what's happening around you. And when I think about the future of work, especially at that intersection of humanity and technology and trust, I think the leaders that we will need most will be those who understand people,
Mm.
not just generically, but more individually.
Yeah.
I think over time, everybody tries to figure this out. What's the best style of leadership? What's that perfect style that every company can thrive on? I don't think there is one universal way to lead because humans are so diverse in how we communicate, how we process information and change. We're very different in what factors motivate us. What makes us feel safe, what makes us feel valued. And because humans are so diverse, we can't expect one leadership style to work for everybody.
Mhm.
And I know that, technology can create efficiency, but it can also create fear and that uncertainty. And oftentimes it can create a feeling of being replaced. And I know I've mentioned this a couple of times today. I believe the leaders of our future are going to be those who are great translators. They can take complex ideas, emotional reactions, rapid change, all of those things, and know how to lead people through it by understanding what it takes for people to perform at their best. They're going to have to listen to the people around them,
Mm-hmm.
understand how to communicate effectively, understand how each of those people around them receives information, what motivates them to do their best. They're going to know how to connect those dots between the needs of people and the business goals. But that kind of leader never stops learning. They have to also be very self-aware and understand their own biases. They're going to have to stay flexible rather than trying to lead on autopilot and apply the same style to everybody.
Yeah.
I think they also need to be very attuned to what people are feeling, what they're afraid of, what they need to feel secure. And then just continue reshaping their own approach as the workforce in the world changes. Because ultimately, the future of work, I don't think it's about replacing humans so much as it is about elevating humans.
Mm. I love that. And I couldn't agree more because automation is so scary to many, right? When we talk about AI and just the innovation of things. I think that's one of the biggest fears that people have. It's being replaced. And I agree with you so much that people don't realize automation used the right way, effectively, right, is really to elevate our skill sets and
Yes.
not replace us. Could not agree more. Kristen, wow, amazing. Thank you for this honest and deeply grounding conversation. You have reminded us that real leadership is not built on pressure or position, it's built on presence and trust. It is built on protecting people and on the courage to lead with clarity when the stakes are high and in the spotlight, when the spotlight is bright and shining on you, still leading with clarity. You lead with a rare combination of strength and humanity, and your commitment to well being and trust and culture is the kind of leadership our workspaces need now more than ever. So, before we close, let our listeners know what's the best place to find you? Where can they find you and connect if they choose to?
I am on LinkedIn. And so listeners can connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to talk with anyone about anything that we discussed today or any other ideas that came to mind as they listen to this podcast. I'm a student of humanity forever, and I truly believe that. So anything I can learn from anyone, I'm welcome to the conversations, and anything I can share to help others, I will do that too.
Awesome. Thank you so much for just being an amazing woman and an amazing leader. Um, Thank you for sharing your heart, your wisdom, and your journey with us today. And to everyone listening, remember this: leadership is not just what you do, it is how you show up, who you protect, and the integrity you carry in each and every room. Until next time, I am Latina Berryhill, and you have been listening to Reaching the Boardroom, because real leadership is felt long before it is seen. Thank you.